Welcome to another episode of Frontlines. We'd like to welcome our guests from across the United States and Canada, throughout Europe and the Middle East, and of course in Armenia and Artsakh. Today we join you on the one-year anniversary of the signing of the trilateral statement, which ended active hostilities in the war of aggression that was started by Azerbaijan in 2020 in September. However, the one-year mark saw, for many of us, another dark chapter in that we all witnessed reports of the murder of a 22-year-old young man, civilian, in Artsakh by Azeri military forces. Joining us today is a guest that the world has come to know very well over the course of the last year, if not the years prior. And with that, I'd like to kick it over to Garo to introduce our guest for today.
Thank you, Karnig, and welcome, my dear friend, Arman Tatoyan. I'd like to begin our broadcast this evening in Los Angeles and in Chicago and elsewhere in the United States by once again welcoming everyone and wishing them a good day in Yerevan, a good day in Stepanakert, and good day everywhere else. In an announcement today, the Armenian National Committee of America Western Region stated the following. The ANCA Western Region mourns the loss and honors the memory of the 6,000 courageous martyrs who lost their lives in the defense of our homeland. For 44 days, the Armenian American community came together in an unprecedented way to advocate for peace and security for the people of Artsakh and the upholding of their fundamental right to self-determination. While the war ended in a disastrous ceasefire agreement that resulted in much of the historic Armenian lands to be occupied by Azerbaijan and the displacement of many indigenous Armenians from their ancestral homeland, the struggle for a just resolution of conflict and the independence of the Republic of Artsakh is far from over. The ANCA Western Region remains committed to working towards ensuring the United States upholds its responsibility as a co-chair of the OSCE Minsk Group and acts immediately to secure the release of all POWs and hostages, end military assistance and arms sales to Turkey and Azerbaijan, and prioritize the determination of Artsakh's status, which remains the only means of preserving the very existence of the Armenian people in the face of this existential threat. Our guest this evening in the United States and this morning in Yerevan and Stepanakert is the Republic of Armenia's human rights defender, its ombudsman, Arman Tatoyan. Arman Tatoyan, who is soon to be the recipient of the Human Rights Champion Award by the ANCA Western Region during its November 21st gala luncheon, which is part and parcel of its long-standing annual grassroots conference, joins us once again. Armanjan, welcome once again to Frontlines. Karnig?
I'd like, if you can, to touch on a number of subjects today that will put in perspective for our viewers the current status of a number of key issues, including border security, the issue of POWs, but in particular in the context of where we are 1 year after the trilateral statement. I understand and feel, along with many of our viewers, quite a bit of frustration regarding the assertiveness, the sovereign assertiveness of the Republic of Armenia on many fronts on these human rights issues. And as you know, our program was launched to bring information to our viewers on law, human rights, and the Armenian experience at the time the war began. And with that, I feel like we've grown together in raising these issues, discussing these issues, and really trying to bring some sense of understanding and direction to where things are going. So if I can ask you, Arman, and I understand for our viewers too, we should say that we have the benefit of some visuals during the presentation, so it's going to be a little bit different than we've done in the past. But technology agreeing with us, we should be fine. And with that, Arman, I'd like to pass it off to you to start perhaps giving us some overarching themes that you find important here 1 year after the signing of the trilateral statement.
Thank you very much, Karnig John, and thank you, Garo John, for your introduction. Today's topic is very important for the hotline. It refers to the results, to the situation that we have after the war. Unfortunately, 1 year passed, but the impunity for human rights violations, for torture, for ill treatment, for use of cluster bombs, other human rights violations led to new violations, to a new situation, and it resulted in the illegal existence of illegally kept POWs, Armenian POWs, captives in Azerbaijan. Human rights gross violations of the border residents of Armenia, especially in the context of Kerkonian and Sunni provinces, and other violations. State-supported deepening Azerbaijani hatred and the policy of animosity propaganda, clearly amounting to fascism. And I have to say that these are the root causes. Even this policy is the only source, is the real source for these human rights violations. And if you allow me, I will turn now to a presentation and will try to present facts, special objective evidence related to the violations, not only to the captives and prisoners of war, but also human rights ongoing violations of the border residents. This is especially important since these violations, they take place literally every day in different forms. We have shootings, extrajudicial killings, terrorist acts against civilians, violation of property rights, etc.
Garo, if you could reintroduce the subject where we were on the presentation that Arman was about to share.
So our guest this evening and this morning elsewhere is Arman Tatoyan, the human rights defender of the Republic of Armenia. And he had just begun his presentation on the 1 year anniversary of the trilateral agreement. And with that, we kindly ask that Mr. Tatoyan recommences from the beginning the very important presentation that was underway before we were off the air somehow for some reason. I don't know if we are again or not.
Thank you, and I hope the presentation is available.
We see this now as Armenia as a country is of no value. It is actually a colony, an outpost from abroad, a territory artificially created.
Okay.
Remarks by Aliyev, I believe. Yes.
Yeah. So I was speaking about the fact that Azerbaijani authorities, from the very first moment of the war, started to hide the real number of captives, of Armenian captives, both civilians and prisoners of war. So according to the statistics, at least we have acknowledged 80 cases of forced disappearances. We have extrajudicial killings of civilians and prisoners of war, at least 64 cases. Torture and ill treatment of Armenian captives, 108 at least. And criminal proceedings, fake sham criminal proceedings against acknowledged captives, at least 45. So all together is 297 at least. I have also to say that according to acknowledged numbers, there are still 40 Armenian captives in Azerbaijan right now being illegally kept under fake proceedings. And these proceedings are artificial. they're just there to prolong or to create artificial legal grounds for Azerbaijan not to return Armenian captives not to release and return them to Armenia. And of course, these people are under threat of torture, under threat of for their lives, and Azerbaijan continues keeping Armenian prisoners of war and continues using them for bargaining purposes, even in political and in other contexts, just to gain political and military benefits. So this is what I was going to, let's say, as a summary, kind of, to say about the issue of prisoners of war and civilian captives. And by this, I'm more than confident that the activities of Azerbaijani authorities, they do contain elements of war crimes, separate war crimes, for causing not only illegally keeping them and violating by this international humanitarian law, but causing sufferings, mental sufferings to the families of captives, disappeared persons, and their families, which is very important in this context, since these people hope that their family members are in captivity, and I think this is highly accepted. Of course, it's accepted by Azerbaijani authorities that this is one of the points of their agenda generally against Armenia and Artsakh. So, if you allow me, I will now turn to the second, let's say, issue, so to say. This is the state-supported hatred in Azerbaijan, a genocidal policy which clearly amounts to fascism. And I have to say that these are root causes of ethnically motivated atrocities by the Azerbaijani military. Unfortunately, this policy, there is a lack of recognition in the world. We have to go towards this direction to recognize this policy as the real source of all the violations. And since this policy continues, we have also continuous ongoing human rights violations. They are now happening in the bordering areas of Armenia. They were during the war, and they had the most severe and extremist forms. And moreover, I have to say that after the war, this policy had already got extremist forms and very clearly amount to fascist policy. Azerbaijani authorities very often blame Armenians generally for being fascist, but I think this is a mirroring effect, and they have the same and even deeper policy of fascism, and whereas there has been never a single government in Armenia that could have anti-Azerbaijani state policy. There was never, ever, we did not have these policies. Now, I will just bring several citations from the Azerbaijani president's public speeches, which reflect very clearly the level of the amount of hate speech. So these are a couple of just expressions. Armenia is a country of no value. It is actually a colony, an outpost run from abroad, a territory artificially created on ancient Azerbaijani lands. And during the war, there was a kind of a slogan, very famous: Azerbaijani soldiers expel or drive Armenians like dogs. And there is even one of the drones created by Azerbaijan, or the main, let's say, this production, let's say, and since the beginning of the production, these drones even were called in the Azerbaijani language Itikovan, which means driving like dogs, and meaning, of course, Armenians. And these are some other words. For 30 years, meaning Artsakh, it was in the hands of wild beasts, in the hands of predators, in the hands of jackals. These remains are manifestations of Armenian fascism and the witness to Armenian fascism. We will continue to expel these liars. They have neither conscience nor morality. They don't have even a brain. And I have to say, in one of his speeches, he even said that Armenianism, generally Armenians, they are worse than coronavirus, which is apparent demonstration of fascism and Nazism generally. we must not and will not forget about our historic lens. This must determine our future activity, and we are already working in that direction. Our historic lens are Yerevan, Zangezur, Goicha, meaning Lake Sevan. Both the young generation and the world should know about this. And then he also said that Yerevan is our historical land, and we, the Azerbaijanis, will go back to this historical lens. It is our political and strategic goal, and we gradually reach it. So these are only several examples, and the Human Rights Defender's Office currently is preparing a new report trying to show that the links, to prove the links between these violations and this state-supported hatred and the animosity propaganda. Now, in the context of Syunik and Kerkonian provinces, I will try to present, to illustrate the main issues related to human rights. First of all, we have two main issues, two main problems. This is the presence of Azerbaijani military servicemen, armed servicemen, near villages of Kerkonian and Syunik, and on the roads between the communities of Syunik. Because of the presence of these armed forces and military generally, including border troops, including police, it totally disrupted normal life of people. It is a threat, total threat to the security and peace of people. Itself, their presence is a violation of rights of our compatriots who live in bordering areas. First of all, we have to acknowledge a very important thing. Every process related to determination of borders, specifically this is delimitation and demarcation, it has every process has international principles and indicating principles which compose legitimacy of the whole process. So currently, according to OSCE standards and other international standards, there should be respect for human rights, democracy, rule of law, and preservation of normal and traditional life of border population. So what we have now? We have total disruption of Armenia's border population's normal and traditional life. We have violation of right to life. By the way, I have to say that according to European Court of Human Rights standards, itself presence of Azerbaijani, it derives from the jurisprudence that itself presence of Azerbaijani military forces near our villages and on the roads is violation of the right to life. The right to liberty and security, right to property is grossly violated as well, since Azerbaijani military forces are physically present in the lands, houses that belong to our citizens, even according to cadastral documentation issued even by Soviet authorities, not even independent Armenia, but Soviet authorities. And freedom of movement, of course, because people refrain from traveling, from using these roads. And this is a real threat for their families and real threat for people. I will illustrate on concrete examples. We have violation of children's rights. There is a violation of right to water and sanitation, especially I mean Sev Lake or Sev Lich in Syunik and Mehri. We have Azerbaijanis, again, because of their activities, people are deprived of this right. And in Vartenis and Garamasar communities in Kerkonian, we have villages that do not have water at all, including drinking water, because some of the basins and water reservoirs became under the control of Azerbaijan. And of course, we have violations of the whole process, since the whole process was mechanical, under threats of new war, which delegitimizes, of course, the whole activity and the presence of Azerbaijani because it was under threat of use of force. Now I will show results of our monitoring missions in Kerkonian province. This is, first of all, these are cases of incursion. We know that there is an Azerbaijani incursion. There are Azerbaijani incursions into the Armenian territory. Now, the examples of Vartenis, this is Verin-Shorja village, and Geramasar community, this is Kut village. Now you can see this is the part of the Kerkonian province of Armenia. This is Kut village, Sotk village, and this is Verin-Shorja village. So these tents, for example, in Kut next to, in the immediate vicinity of the Kut village. It resulted into not only we have incursion, but there are, because of this incursion, there are gross massive violations of human rights and even new forms, terroristic forms. For example, everyone remembers maybe how Azerbaijanis were setting fires to the territories, and these were causing extremely high damages and to our civilian population. Now, and we had very recently also shootings, direct and having direct targets, houses. Now this is Verin Shorja. Verin Shorja village or their presence here is also causes gross violations, and this is inside the territory of the Republic of Armenia. Here we also.
If I may interrupt real quickly, what has your research uncovered the estimation of the numbers of Azerbaijani troops that are actually?
It's very hard to say, but I have to say that because it is according to our monitoring and to our information, this number is changing. But what I have to say that these locations, or the number of tents, reflect exact number of locations of Azerbaijani military in these areas. I think, well, we have cases when they have 20, 30 more Azerbaijanis or less in one location, let's say. And these tents, the yellow ones, reflect the exact number. And in Verin Shorja, for example, this is Verin Shorja. These photos were taken by us, by me and by our office. This is this exact part here I'm showing, Verin Shorja, the cattle barn. And this is the exact part. Here are on the right side, the Azerbaijani armed soldiers. On the left side, this is a cattle barn of an Armenian border residence under the target. So people cannot even, despite the fact that this is the other Armenian territory, sovereign territory, people cannot approach their cattle barns because Azerbaijan is then open shootings. And this is open fire.
Arman, what's the distance between these two locations? If the distance? Know. Yes.
The distance is less than 100 meters.
I see.
And this photo was taken by us. Now again, this is Verin Shorja. This is Azerbaijani military position, and the house and cattle barn of an Armenian border residence under Azerbaijani target. You can see a house, an Armenian cattle barn and Azerbaijani military position. So a question now, a clear question. Isn't it a violation of the rights of these people, how they're living there? Because these parts are used by people. People during spring, summer, and autumn, people move to these places. They live there, literally live there with their families, because this has been always the tradition in this area, and it is they used to live under constant threat. Again, despite we have to have in mind that this is the sovereign territory of Armenia, and Azerbaijanis are under the above these people, above the heads of these people. And again, these photos were taken by us during the monitoring mission.
Can we go back to that picture, this one, for a second? I have a question regarding this, because there's another thing that looks like it's missing in this photo. Where are Armenian troops located in any of these border towns, if any? I mean, clearly, this is a pretty dangerous situation. This is something that's come back, this theme of Azerbaijanis being able to take higher positions, geographic positions above Armenian towns and villages. Are there Armenian troops? Are there border troops in the vicinity in order to protect these populations?
Karnig, there are Armenian troops. By the way, we have not only military armed forces. These are the forces of Ministry of Defense, but we have also border troops, and these are the troops of our National Security Service. And I have to say that our soldiers there, servants of our border services, they do undertake heroic service. And I have to say that they have important, vital function of protecting our population. We have locations of Armenian military, but I have to say that intentionally we did not reflect in our reports locations, since it could be real threat for the kind of explosion of military secrecy, and that is why, for security reasons, we are not reflecting publicly locations of our military forces and border guards.
You know, Arman, I'm sorry, but I'm reminded of the time that I'm reminded of the time that you were in the region and you were stopped, not once, but I believe twice, by armed forces of the Azerbaijani government's military. Items were confiscated, or verbal threats were made. So the question is, during those incidents, what proximity was the Armenian border units, if you will, or the Armenian Defense Forces? Was it not in Armenia proper territory that you were stopped, you, the human rights defender, were stopped and asked to give up your work product? That wasn't the case, or am I mistaken?
Yes, I'm coming to this. So this is the exact, thank you for the question, Garo, because I'm coming to this, and this is the part exactly related to interstate road between Goris and Kapan. This is road M2 and the Sunik province. Now here you can see, and the viewers can see, this is the house located in the Vorotan part, which this is the section of the road leading from Goris to Kapan. This house, you can see this in Armenian language. This is the cadastral documentation certifying the right to property of an Armenian citizen to over this house. So this is a right belongs to Armenian citizen, but was illegally confiscated, I can say, by the Azerbaijani military forces, even without compensation, because under international regulations, compensations must be provided, or anyway, this was illegally taken by Azerbaijani military forces. And now this is the Azerbaijani police checkpoint at this section, which is totally illegal because of their illegal presence in the when these two countries have not completed demarcation and delimitation process. So they, as a result of their illegal locations, they stop people who legally are present in the territory of Armenia legally. These are first of all citizens of the Islamic Republic of Iran, for example, or Armenian citizens. There was a case, when these people, with openly criminal behavior, they stopped Armenian children, a bus of Armenian children, and this was in this exact part, and for intimidation purposes. And all their actions are illegal. They afford even stopping cars which are legally using these roads. That is why I think there are clear grounds also for showing this. And this is, Garo, this is the exact part when we were stopped. This is part leading from M2 interstate road from Davidbek village to Shurnuch village, which is the part of Goris community, and Davidbek is part of Kapan. We stopped there just to make 2-3 photos, and I have to say that here is the military position right on the road, I have to say, exactly. And here is the soldier. You can see this soldier, when noticed us, he immediately entered this building, this small building, took his rifle, fire gun, and directed it towards us. And the others were sitting here next in another building and were shouting, etc. And one of them was watching through binoculars. But we stopped even for less than 1 or 2 minutes. And the purpose was just to take a couple of photos. And I can imagine what may happen to people who, for example, may wish to stop or may have to stop because they may feel bad due to health status, for example, or for other reasons. And there were only civilian cars. And we had another case in the part related that takes in the section of the road that takes from Kapan to Chakaten village, which again we had the same problem. An Azerbaijani soldier with a gun standing and having us or keeping us as their targets. Apparently, this is violation of human rights and violation of border residents' rights, because these cases may happen every day and every moment. Now I want to go to Blake Lake. This is Sevlij, Sunik province. And again, these are the results of the monitoring of Armenia's Human Rights Defenders Office, of our professionals. And I was several times visited these places. So this is the incursion. The line that you can see, this line is taken from Google Earth, from Google Map, let's say. And at least it shows, let's say, the border between Armenia and it says Azerbaijan according to Google Earth. But now you can see inside the territory of Armenia up to even 6 kilometers in certain places, locations of Azerbaijani military. You can see also the locations of Azerbaijani military, how close they are to our villages. And from these places, we have shootings, we have other violations. And by the way, all these territories near Sevlij or Black Lake, they are used by people because these are pastures, these are grasslands, etc. Hundreds, if taking the whole Armenia, thousands of hectares now are under the control of Azerbaijani military and people cannot use them. And here we can see already their community. This is Khanatsakh village. We have further Khoznavar village, etc. And this is one example, just one example of Khoznavar village. Here you have Azerbaijani, you see above people's heads, let's say even, locations of illegal locations of Azerbaijani military. And of course, this is a direct threat to security of people. We have even worse cases. We have a case in next to village Nerkinhand, this is Kapan, where Azerbaijanis are located even in several hundreds of meters away from secondary school. And this is, of course, a violation of children's rights. Now I will try, well, let me say that we have revealed the Office of the Human Rights Defender, third incursion. So we could see now two incursions. Now there's the third incursion. This is Kapan community. This is Tsav village, Nerkinhand village, Sarashen, but again, incursion inside the territory of Armenia, 1.2 kilometers. And I have to say that this incursion, according to our information, it took place in October last year, so not this year. It happened during the war, Azerbaijani incursion. So we didn't know about this. And I don't think that our population generally at large, public at large could know about this. But we have, let's say, documented through our monitoring missions, fact-finding missions, and every every information or piece of information or data is very credible. It's based on our personal own monitoring, direct sources, let's say. Now, just one example. I will bring examples of two very small villages. This is village Kut and village Norabag in Kerkonian province. So these are the hectares of lands in the control directly. Azerbaijanis are now directly physically present in these lands. So you can see this, how we could count this, because first of all, based on our cooperation with local communities, but based on the legal documentation that belong to our people. So because all our people have lease agreements, have other legal documentation that certify this, that these lands belong to them, and they have legitimate rights. And we have also calculation of damages that our compatriots, that were caused to our compatriots as a result of Azerbaijani incursions and illegal actions. So for example, this is one example. This is David Beck community. This is calculation of damages of one person. So you can imagine now how many people we have. And all these calculations, unfortunately, I think there are many cases when these calculations are not made, and because resources of our office also are very limited, but to the extent possible, we could calculate at least some of them. This is also one example of cadastral documentation. This is village Karahunj, community Karahunj in Goris. I put it intentionally to show that this document certifies, was issued by a Soviet Armenian authority and was renewed by Armenian independent authority, but still Soviet Armenia. So no one can blame even independent Armenia, saying that you could exaggerate, etc. And this is an example of Հողամասի վարձակալության պայմանագիր. This is the lease agreement example of pastures. And this is a proof or a document proving that all the rights of our citizens over these lands is certified and documented. So having said all of this, I have to say that at the end, last week we have published a special report of the Human Rights Defender on urgent necessity for a demilitarized security zone in the areas of contact with the Azerbaijani military forces as a fundamental safeguard to protect the rights of population in Armenia. And it is an evidence-based analysis in the context of ongoing situation in Kerkonian and Sunni provinces. And and people can just easily access. This is the link this link to this report and the link to the Google Earth application. So we have projected all the locations of Azerbaijani military. It is available on our Facebook page, all social media pages, including our website, and the report, of course, which is published.
And Arman, I would like to ask you, if you wouldn't mind to stop sharing your screen so that we can get a full screen on there we go.
And I finished my presentation. This was the last time.
And we will put the links, obviously, on our page as well, so that people can actually go and study the reports in detail. I do know, though, that Garo has a question overarching with respect to the issues that you had raised. But before we get to that, if I can just ask one question, Arman. Well, let me ask two questions. The first is, other than your office, are there any other government authorities that are doing the research in collecting this information in order to preserve it for delimitation and demarcation talks, number one, and number two, I know firsthand that your reports, particularly with respect to hate speech, were used at the ICJ case at The Hague. I wanted to ask you, the reports regarding the border security issues and your research and fact-finding missions, where are you submitting them to? Who within the government or international players has access to them, and what is your hope for their ability to use this information, because it is priceless?
Well, yes, thank you, Ghazarian, and thank you for, and I want to express my special thankfulness to you for your tremendous role in participating in our team of lawyers at ICJ, International Court of Justice, and I have to say this was such an important intervention, and I know that you yourself personally played a huge role bringing international standards and helping our team, all of us, always in shedding light, let's say, to all the very important issues and analyzing international standards. Now, when it comes to the issue of our reports, yes, we do submit them to international partners. We are preparing now, we have actually finished preparation of special letters with special emphasis, and today they will be delivered to international partners and to Armenian authorities. To Armenian authorities, specifically to the parliament, to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Defense Ministry, and of course our representative before the European Court of Human Rights, and so that they can use in international undertakings and general initiatives. I want to say the main problem right now that exists in Armenia. border issues are detached from human rights. So human rights kind of are not considered, or the legal parts are not considered as the part of the problem. All the issues are only being discussed from politico-military dimension angle. But I think this is very wrong. The human dimension is totally ignored, which is a huge problem. And I think that political-military dimension is exactly in the interest of Azerbaijan, because all of these legal issues, they are ignored, and they are doing everything. Azerbaijani authorities, they do everything to left aside, to abandon all these legal issues, and to consider everything from political or military perspectives, let's say. And that is why this report aims at bringing, let's say, to all the professionals, to all the authorities, human rights problems, and to show that they are interlinked. It is not possible to consider them separately. And due to this report, due to these legal issues, we have now the possibility to claim that there should be a demilitarized security zone, because this is a pure human rights issue, which means the removal of Azerbaijani armed forces, military or whatsoever, and whoever, from all our villages and exact vicinity and the roads. And I have to say that there has been a very exceptional development. First time ever, based on our proposal, the Council of Europe PACE Parliamentary Assembly passed a resolution on September 27 this year, mentioning specifically that negotiations must start to create a demilitarized security zone. And this report presents also international experience on safe zones, on security zones, that there is international experience and in several cases. And when it comes to, and by the way, this is also very important, the security zone, for the Artsakh issue. And I will try now to explain why. Look, the limitation or demarcation without the security zone may take decades, right? 20, 30 years, I don't know. And it will mean that violation of rights of our border population will remain for years, which is a huge problem. But creation of a security zone means also that all the processes will depend on the human rights issue, and definitely will be delayed in this sense. And the human rights component will help strengthen political and military dimensions. When as for the other authorities, well, I very much hope that at least we have certain data in other authorities and bodies, but whatever we have, quite credible information, we will send, of course, and we are sending them anyway. All this information is published, but we will send them anyway so that they can use it during their activities.
Garo, you're on mute.
Arman, the human rights issue is your mandate. You know Armenian law better than I do. Is human rights a mandate of yours exclusively, in that the government of Armenia, its executive branch, does not touch it? Because while you have been talking about demilitarized zone, you're talking about security at the border towns and villages, we don't see much coming from the government in terms of declarations or statements that echo those concerns. In fact, we see the opposite. Sometimes we see so much the opposite that is quite upsetting, when certain government officials, and you know who I'm referring to, begin to undermine your very credible efforts, and in doing so, without realizing it, assist the atrocity committing leader of Azerbaijan, dictator Aliyev. Is this an exclusive domain of yours? that they cannot touch, or they just don't want to touch? I know it's a tough question because I don't want you to feel that I'm setting you up to criticize or opine about the government. But, you know, everybody out there in the diaspora seems to be of the opinion that I share, that Arman Tatoyan is just about the only person that advances these issues and is committed and dedicated. I'm sure there are others who are committed and dedicated. You'll agree with me. But how come as to these issues, the government politically and in other ways, all of the levers at its disposal does nothing, or seemingly does not appear to be doing anything? Is this a matter of mandate, or is it something else?
Karojan, yes, this is a very sensitive, I would say, as you said, tough question. But, you know, one of the main problems is the lack of understanding of the role of this institution, lack of understanding information that activities of the any national human rights institution is very legitimate, is absolutely legitimate, and there are international standards which are the basis for my activities. These standards are published. These are adopted by the UN. These are adopted by other international organizations, declarations in the form of declarations, etc., which provides legal grounds for this institution to work in these areas, which we do, and which is called human rights protection in conflict and post-conflict areas or situations. It includes not only fact-finding missions, etc., but also proposals, criticism, recommendations, etc. But in all our activities, I have to say, we have never criticized Armenian authorities for, well, we did certain, they were, of course, and it is in line with our international principles. But when it comes, for example, to the locations of Azerbaijanis, etc., we have, of course, given the interest of our people and the statehood, let's say, protection needs, etc., we're focusing on the violations, but we are objective also in revealing the problems, because there are certain issues that Armenia and generally the government has also the burden to protect people, because or the obligation, let's say, these are the positive obligations of the government. Anyway, of course, nothing stops us, and we have a team of patriots, lawyers, specialists, and we are going forward. We'll continue our activities. And I have to say that these are not all officials, of course, or kind of authorities as a general. We have, of course, officials, high-level officials with whom we work very smoothly, and this work is very effective. For example, certain governors of certain provinces. Why I'm saying certain, because we do work with them since they are engaged in conflict and post-conflict areas. Law enforcement agencies, which is very border guards, etc. This cooperation with them is vital, and I appreciate activities of our partners. They do understand the importance of our activities, and we try to complement each other's work for the sake of the rights of our compatriots. I'm not talking even about the security zone, etc. But for me, the important thing is, the very important thing, the most important thing is not to ignore human rights and legal issues, because it strengthens, apparently it strengthens political and military dimensions. That is why it is in the interest of Azerbaijan to leave aside everything and only to consider everything from political and military. That is why I criticize always all the officials who are speaking only about maps of 70s, 50s, 60s, but they forget that first, of course, all these lands, they are historically Armenian, but again, if only taking legal issues, we have to take into account that behind every meter, behind every kilometer, we have our compatriots with their problems, with their security, with their social problems, And we have to take account the urgent necessity to protect these people. Moreover, we have full legal grounds. International grounds are there. For example, according to international standards, special commissions must be established for monitoring cadastral documentation, property rights, etc., and so forth.
Arman, I wanted to ask you a question that relates to really kind of your assessment as to the, there was a lot of talk over the last several weeks, in fact, probably over the last month or two, regarding a subsequent meeting that was going to take place in Moscow, and then it wasn't going to take place in Moscow, and then it was going to take place by video conference, and then it wasn't going to take place by video conference. You had mentioned in your presentation that the slowing down of the demarcation and delimitation process is to our advantage in order to provide an opportunity to have issues of human rights and border security issues, and even a security zone, perhaps, integrated into that process. I wanted to ask you, going forward, with respect to the issues that we're hearing regarding the opening of transportation corridors and things of that nature, transportation communications links and things of that nature, do you foresee further human rights issues developing as communication channels are in the process of being discussed to open? And do you fear that if the negotiating powers aren't able to integrate human rights, the human rights issue, the rights of civilians in border communities in this process, and the issues that you've highlighted right now, given the incursions, that when we get to the issues of communications and rail links and other types of transportation links, that we are going to walk into a quagmire of still other human rights issues? What do you see going forward as some of the main challenges that your office, and indeed human rights activists in Armenia, in Artsakh, are going to face, given what we're seeing in terms of these discussions regarding transportation links?
Communication is very important, and no one can deny this, I think, for any state and for our state as well. But what concerns me, or I think I consider it as a matter of concern, what are the guarantees? What are the safeguards for our civilian population? And what would be the forms or the formats of these communications? What would be the transportation ways, etc., the roads? Everything matters. I have to say that we have also analyzed all the crimes committed by Azerbaijani military during Soviet times when these communications were open, railway, etc. I requested, several months ago, I sent a special letter to the head of police of Armenia, and I required information from archive. The information submitted to us proves that there were violations, including crimes. Now, the main concern for me is what are the safeguards? What would be the safeguards? Since, as I mentioned, there is very simple or answer to a very simple question, that the source of for all these violations is the Azerbaijani ongoing policy of animosity, propaganda, and hatred. And this policy is deepening and deepening, by the way. So in these conditions, having this factor and having the communication and having everyday violations, every day being committed every day, I don't see, for the moment, it is very fragile for me. What are the human rights safeguards? I'm not saying that communications must be blocked always, no. But what I'm saying, I'm always calling I'm directing my calls upon also international community, society, to international community, saying them that these people, the perpetrators of this crime, must be brought, must be held liable. This is the most effective way to get rid of this policy of hatred. Because this hatred is also very dangerous, not only for this region, but the countries must understand that this is dangerous for them as well. Because it keeps atmosphere of animosity, not only in this region, but in their countries as well, because they have Azerbaijanis and Armenians living together. And that is why this policy is dangerous, not only for this region. And even in other countries, we had problems, attacks against Armenians by Azerbaijanis, Turks even, which is a real threat for our compatriots who live outside of Armenia in other countries. And what is the source? The source is the Azerbaijani state policy of hatred. The same is for the communications.
And I have to say, when you brought that up as the core source behind really all of the uncertainty that we're seeing and moving forward with, I remember sitting in Garo's dining room maybe 5 years ago at this point, and looking over a research document that you and I believe Ruben Melikian, who was the human rights defender of the Republic of Artsakh at the time, had prepared in the aftermath of the 4-day war in 2016. And what is shocking is, history constantly repeats itself when the sources of the problem are not addressed. And this is exactly what we're hearing now and what I'm hearing from you.
Yes.
And when you had in your presentation the statements by the Azeri president regarding Armenians, it reminded me of the numerous statements that were highlighted in that work that you had prepared along with Ruben Melikian in 2016, identifying similar statements that were made at that point. And until those issues are resolved, it seems very, very difficult that any sort of progress can be made in a way that promotes the human rights and safety and security of people that are impacted by whether it's transportation, whether it's communication, whether it's border issues. It is really commendable that your constant push has been to insert these issues into the discourse and the dialogue of the major political and military undertakings that have been thrust upon the region. So I cannot underline how important what you said is in terms of the source of the problem. And I know that people on our show have people that have viewed our programs. Many times we come back to this theme because this theme is the underlying theme that drives a lot of the uncertainty in the region, the insecurity in the region. And until that issue is resolved, the idea of quote unquote moving forward, whatever that means, is nearly impossible unless we're condemned to repeat the same incidents that we're seeing inflicted on our people on a day-to-day basis. Garo, any thoughts on that?
If I may, just one small addition. You are absolutely right. And the hatred, there is a certain kind of mechanism. The hatred is being generated by political or promoted by political authorities. Then highly encouraged, absolutely encouraged by cultural figures, public figures, because this is also from the structure of the state. They are under the direct influence of the control of the political authorities. And let me just read out only one example. This is a citation. These are words of a very famous people's writer in Azerbaijan, Fahid Aziz. It was these words. He said this after the war in May. We documented it. It will be in my review report. I will read out it in Armenian. Հայերը անբարոյական ազգ են։ Այդ կորնիկները մինչև ճանապարհին 100,000 գլուխ չթողնեն, չեն հանգստանալու։ Դրանք բացի քաոս ստեղծելուց ոչինչ չեն կարող անել։ Այն դիվերսանտները, որոնք փորձում են մեր սահմանն անցնել, պետք է տեղում գնդակահարեն։ So you see, these are the consequences of the years of institutional policy of hatred. And that is by the whole and highly encouraged by these people who are very authoritative in the society. And everything is being boiled in the society. And the form, what is the form? The form is a torture, is atrocity, ill treatment, etc. That is why this is the only source that comes for the violations.
Garo.
Thank you. You referred, Arman, to the state policy of anti-Armenianism pursued by Azerbaijan on many occasions. One thing that you highlighted in those references was the state sponsorship of the Azerbaijani authorities being based on two pillars of violations of rights of the populations of Armenia and that of Artsakh, ethnic and religious. You know, at first when one reads that and says, oh no, because everybody wants to say, this is not ethnic, this is not religious, this is territorial integrity. United Nations does not recognize this to be historic Armenia. It recognizes it as part of Azerbaijan. But when one takes a closer look, one sees the ethnic and religious component very much present and very much driving all of the atrocities that take place. My question to you, briefly, if you can answer it, is your extensive interaction with the European government's respective human rights defenders, and you holding the A+ status as a human rights defender office, with all the European standards, highly acclaimed your office. What is the holdup for them to understand or accept and embrace that which you have correctly identified and take measurable steps not just as institutions of human rights for these respective European countries, but also have it transcend to policy of these respective nations of Europe?
This is a very important question, very important. And unfortunately, too many these issues are politicized. And there is always, unfortunately, still after the war, there is equality. The international organizations report sometimes try to put in equal conditions Armenia and Azerbaijan, politicizing issues not to enter into the human rights the components. That is why I think that we have to be very active here to mobilize all our resources to show that these are not only political and military issues, but first of all, human rights issues. This is the very important thing, humanitarian issue, which must not be never ever politicized and manipulated, which of course Azerbaijani side is always trying to do. And of course I want to appreciate here Armenian diaspora, because in these conditions of problems, politicization everywhere, Armenian diaspora, our compatriots do help us also present real human rights issues to the worldwide community.
Arman Can, if I may, I have one last question. I know we're pushing over an hour here, but I wanted to ask you before you leave us regarding, and you raised the issue of the diaspora and really Armenians in Armenia and Artsakh as well, with respect to the issue of the human rights of Artsakh civilians. What do you recommend as the main themes that should be part of our discourse moving forward in order to protect the security and both ethnic and cultural rights of Armenians in Artsakh, and of course their right to self-determination? How do you see, and I know that you work with Kerkonian hand in hand on a number of issues, and have with Artak Beglarian before him as well. There's no question about that. But as you just mentioned, the diaspora, or to our viewers, what are some of the important themes? Because clearly, a lot of these human rights issues are a fortiori in Artsakh, they're even more pronounced there. What is your view on what activism looks like or should look like with respect to protection of the rights and security of the people of Artsakh?
Karnig, I think the first and foremost, the very important thing is not to allow these issues, or let me put it this way: we have to continue active propaganda, actively presenting to the world the reality and to international instances that people live there under existential threat, and that continue under the genocidal policy. And by the way, the nature of violations, I was yesterday talking to Garo, we were discussing again human rights issues. And I can say for sure, my colleague will say the same, I'm confident. The nature of violations is totally the same as Armenia is Artsakh, completely the same. There is no difference, really no difference. The only thing that the Armenia is recognized territory or country or state, Artsakh is a non-recognized state. So this is the only difference. Other than that, the same existential threat, the same violations, genocidal policy, ethnic cleansing, etc., everything is there. So that is why I think this should be two in one. One very important issue, protection of the rights of our people, both in Armenia and Artsakh, addressing the same challenges that we have now. Yes, you are right, even worse than in Armenia, in Artsakh.
Arman, thank you very much again, and we really appreciate the time that you've given us and our viewers over the course of the last year, and especially today, including with the presentation and particularly the maps and the visuals. I think that they were very pronounced and very inspiring to see the amount of work that's being done on this on the ground. And with that, I'd like to kick it over to Garo for his closing thoughts. You're mute, Garo.
Thank you very much, Karnig. And Arman, I also want to join Karnig in thanking you for being a regular participant in our Frontlines live discussions over the last year, and being a part of our struggle as we have been a part of your struggle, our collective national struggle from the first day of the 44-day offensive and the 365 days since last November 9th. In the 1 year since the trilateral declaration of that November 9 of 2020, the Azerbaijani side has deliberately continued its criminal actions against the people of Artsakh and also the people of Armenia, oddly enough, about which we have repeatedly heard during the past 12 months. And you, Mr. Tatoyan, as the world knows you, have informed the international human rights organizations, each of which, I will say, have fallen woefully short of their respective mandates. The large-scale hostilities were meant to be stopped by the trilateral statement, but the aggression and the hostilities by the Azerbaijani-Turkish tandem on the Artsakh front and now on the Armenia front were transformed into planned and coordinated actions to intimidate the population of Artsakh and evict the Armenians from Artsakh. That is their objective, and that is what we are fighting against. And it's telling to look at the statistics presented by the prosecutor's office, the Prosecutor General's office of the Artsakh Republic. It shows that during the past year, 56 crimes after November 9th were committed by the Azerbaijani armed forces located near the residential communities of the Artsakh Republic, in connection with which some 43 criminal cases were initiated. And I sure hope that the Russian peacekeeping forces are doing their part and continue to do their part and do it well. As a result of these actions by Azerbaijan, these criminal acts, 2 civilians, 9 servicemen were killed. 24 civilians and 44 servicemen were attempted to be killed. 9 civilians and 28 servicemen were wounded. 6 people were physically assaulted, and 2 were threatened with death, and 1 was just killed. Martin Yeremian, 22 years of age, just a few days ago, shot dead while repairing a water pipeline simply because he was Armenian. There was no other basis for that homicide. As a result of the criminal intent to purposely destroy and damage Armenian properties, 5 houses, 3 agricultural implements, 7 vehicles, 2 construction equipments were burnt, targeted. 3 orchards and fields were set on fire, and a large herd of cattle was shot at with firearms just in Artsakh. I'm not talking about Armenia. All those reports about what's been going on in Armenia are all out there by your officers, Mr. Tatoyan. Over the past year, shots have been fired from Azeri bases near Armenian towns, both in Artsakh and in Armenia, with bullets being fired at directions of homes, at the rooftops of homes, and at public places of gathering, thereby encroaching, as you have said over and over again, on the psychological immunity of the Armenian civilian population of both Armenia and Artsakh. What are we doing? What are each of us doing is the question I want to leave our audience with today. How are we aiding the effort against these atrocities? Food for thought, some might say. But I leave you with it nevertheless. And I, as a member of the Armenian community of Southern California, or of the greater California, and the Armenian American community, I leave you with all of this as we in Southern California prepare to greet you, my dear friend Arman, greet you on your pending arrival to the region, your visits, and your ultimately being recognized by the Armenian National Committee of America Western Region on November 21st during its annual grassroots conference as the human rights champion that you are. Thank you for joining us. Godspeed. Have a productive day, which I know you will, and we will see you soon again on Frontlines. Good day.